The committee has been seized with the contracting abuse that has happened during the tenure of this NDP Liberal government, and now this corruption and abuse issue is coming to global affairs, the domain of yet another prospective Liberal leadership candidate. In the last 5 years, Foreign Affairs has hired outside consultants over 8,000 times, spending over $500 million. Now, your audit suggests that the rules are not being followed in about a quarter of those cases. So if that proportion holds, we're talking about a total of roughly 2,000 contracts at Mélanie Joly's department that didn't follow the rules, 2,000 contracts at Global Affairs if that proportion holds. And I note as well, Chair, that we're supposed to be promoting democracy and fighting corruption around the world, and yet we're looking at a situation where a quarter of contracts at Global Affairs are not following the rules. I think that's really disgraceful and shouldn't be passed off as simply part of the complexity of the operating environment. I'd like to start by asking the Assistant Deputy Minister what kind of message this sends to our allies and partners, and also to emerging democracies that we're working with on issues of adherence to rules, rule of law. How does this impact our credibility, and what kind of message does it send when we have these massive problems internally?
Thank you very much for the question. First, I would just like to say that the audit did find that we generally do comply with the applicable authorities and that we do maintain the integrity of the process.
No, but we're a quarter of the time you don't, right? So that's a huge problem. That's not acceptable, right? We wouldn't consider that was acceptable if we were looking at a developing country or emerging democracy, right? So what kind of a message does it send that a quarter of the time the rules aren't being followed?
I would just like to clarify, just in terms of the issues that the audit actually found. So, first, just in terms of the compliance of authorities, just to say that I know one of the audit findings was that the audit was unable to demonstrate that all of the necessary information was on file. And just to this, I would just like to mention that. In a lot of these cases, it wasn't necessarily that the documentation didn't exist, but more that when the auditors were looking into finding that information, the information wasn't readily available on file. And maybe
Ms. Carruthers, I do think you're sort of avoiding the question, though. This is a grave problem. It speaks to rule of law, that rules weren't followed. We're supposed to be standing for and championing rule of law on the world stage. And we have rules for a reason. You can say, or others can say, that you don't think particular rules are that important or that significant, but rules were not followed in about a quarter of cases. Documentation that should have been available wasn't. And I'm asking you a very specific question, which is what message does that send when we're trying to project a message about rule of law on the world stage, and we have a quarter of global affairs global affairs contracts seemingly not complying with rules?
Well, if I want to address just the compliance issues that were outlined in the audit, so there were 19 different instances where the document or where
Ms. Carruthers, what message does it send? That's my question. What is the impact on our credibility?
Well,
I've been asking you the same question for about 4 minutes.
I think something really important to actually recognize first is just that there were the number of a quarter is probably inaccurate just in terms of the number of transactions that were found to be incompliant. And of course, additional measures have been taken place within the department to assure that these types of errors don't come up again in the future.
Okay. I think it's pretty clear that the witness is not answering the question. So I would maybe just want to put the witness on notice that this committee does expect answers to questions, and we do insist on those answers.